And it is that time of week where we like to find some people some jobs. You know, the job market continues to be a bit of a struggle for a lot of folks, and thankfully our friends at rlstevens and Associates have joined the 980 WCAP Expert Network to help us out with some tips on finding jobs. And joining us this week from R.L. Stevens is Randy Stevens. How are you, Randy?
Well, good afternoon. I'm fine.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the job market. We've talked about trying to get past gatekeepers, and we've talked about, you know, how to do the job search. Let's talk about trying to land the interview, because that's the biggest key right there. If you can get in the door and talk to somebody face to face, I would imagine that's kind of like the holy grail.
Well, on one hand, you're perfectly centered that's what we all want and would think we want. On the other hand, too many people think if they can get into that position that they'll win the position. And in this market, because of the, we'll call it buyer's market from the employer's view with all the excess talent out there, you have to do a real good amount of research and really understand how your background can help the industry and the company and versus their competition, and really be centered in how to articulate that in a way that is going to be receptive.
Are most employers going to bring in a lot of different people for an interview?
I think that varies by culture. We tend to screen people 15 minutes on the phone first because of all the applicants, just something random from our company. This cuts down a lot of time and such. I think that it depends on how important the mission is. And sometimes you run a second or third campaign of getting the right person and not settle for an average person. I think it depends on what you're looking, how valuable or how critical it is to the company would determine, I would think, the extent of effort.
Randy, it's Dean here. When people go in for the interview, they've made it to that point. What's the biggest mistake that most people make?
Well, I'm going to sound redundant. It's not knowing how to position their attributes to the needs of the buyer.
So they shouldn't say they're people persons, right?
That could help.
Oh, okay.
It depends on the buyer means that the needs of that particular type of concern. If you were going to certain companies, being people-oriented would be positive. See, my point is that whatever your background is, whatever your accomplishments are, whatever your skills are, you're supposed to demonstrate your accomplishments and achievements in line with the exact best needs of the mission going on in that culture, in that industry, and in that type of company. So again, it requires far more homework to be centered when you get there. Just like anything in the world, if you do it really, really well, usually you know a lot more than the other people when you get in there to win a position.
How important is personal appearance in that interview?
Well, I think the old adage of people tend to hire people that they like, number one, people think they can help them, number two, is probably still a fair notion. I think that appearance is part of liking people. I think there are ways to make up for liabilities, such as sincerity, clarity, eye contact, your pace, asking some intelligent questions, not being too passive, listening well. There are ways to dressing nicely, dressing proper for the culture again. But it might be now that people want to hire somebody more that. I hope the human race is getting more tolerant, and I think it is. So on that note, perhaps positioning your skills is still even more important. But I think appearance is part of the mix.
I remember hearing someone put it one way. I always like this. I think it includes job interviews, but most anything. So dress the way you want to be treated.
Well, that's a nice.
That's not a nice rule of thumb.
That's a nice, fair feeling, right? Yeah.
Randy Stevens is joining us from R.L. Stevens and Associates, and their nearby locations, of course, in Waltham as well as in Bedford, New Hampshire. You can check them out online as well at interviewing.com. So as we go through the job search process, we kind of get narrowed in potentially on a job that we'd really like to go after. What's the best way to get that interview? How do we go about making sure that we get that foot in the door?
Well, that's the question. So the right answer is that it depends on your objectives. In this particular economy, a lot of folks, for an example, might want to change industries. Their industry is soft, say, or they are ready to advance functionally at this time in their life, or they're going to try to change their functional path. There are a lot of illustrations of these things. So, just trying to be general about it. When you try to go through a posting on the internet and there's a lot of competition, by that time the company has already filled a lot of the better jobs before they'll get to finally running an ad, which takes time and money for them, or developing a placement option where they'll pay a recruiter or a search firm. And in this economy, that's tough too. So the idea is to have methods to get in around you said gatekeeper, circumvent HR, because HR is not going to look at you very friendly when you're from a different business, unless you're exceptional in a lot of different ways, unless your resume, your conversation, something. So there are a lot of unadvertised approaches, and this time in this world, they're better. They're less competitive, and I'll just give you one tiny example of how when a decision maker receives a letter that talks about their endeavors through the research, through understanding something going on there. These are the beginning of the hiring patterns. And you send a letter, and I'll do this soft. Imagine how, first of all, the letter's opened. Well, if it was a resume, it might go down to HR. A letter goes into the right person, most often. There's nothing on this letter that says no. Even the best resumes can have some objections, if you follow. But the letter might just say, I see you're doing this new development. Let's just take that as the illustration in your company, right? And with my background in, internet or marketing or, whatever it is, or as a byproduct, you might even need more financial people. See? So what you're doing, and then you might say, I'll call and follow it up. Now, there's no money to them. You come at the opportune time. You look like you really want to work for them, and that differentiates you. You're not responding like 300 people to one thing. You're approaching somebody more, as we keep saying on the radio, a solution provider. There's very little desire not to at least have a conversation with this person. And now you can literally call in, do a good job in saying, so-and-so has my letter, get some contact with this person, and if you are masterful on the phone, if you really get it down, if you master it, the likelihood of bringing you in when they have endeavors going on at that point is very high. And watch this, even better. Not only is it 2 or 3 months ahead of postings and placement, usually, but imagine them looking at you properly and then saying, well, let's build the job description. Now we'll take, Sally out of the other division and put her in here, and we'll take Joe out of our other area and put him in here, and we'll take this new person and put him in there, and now these three together comprise a lot of what we need, and then we could run an ad for what we don't have yet, and maybe for the boss, we'll still go and get, do it through placement.
Sure.
So what I just said is kind of the lay of the land that people are all ignorant of. You only see what's left over when they put it in a posting. You only see what's top drawer through placement, because companies right now aren't going to, with all the talent out there, not a lot are going to be desiring of paying. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, So what you have is you have the job market where most people are running to what they have left over that they haven't already filled. That's pretty insightful, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I think that a lot of people, you're right, they're kind of scan the want ads and maybe look online and say, okay, here's what's out there, but there might be a lot of opportunities that they don't ever even get to know about. Because,
well, that's the point. Yeah. You see, think of it from the employer's side. They have such a strong need now to get good help. They have such a opportune time to actually capitalize and bring in someone who can, normally not be available. You might even have some people who, have been unemployed a while, and they could be a great catch for an employer. Sure, it might be at a reduced financial level, but it might be quite a nice fit, if you follow.
Sure.
Quite rewarding. And then as this thing goes up, a lot of people can be heroes if they, get positioned correctly during a recession, then 3-5 years later, those folks can really be in a very, very, I'll use the word sweet position, because they've accomplished, they've made things happen because their skills are suited. See, that's the idea, to get yourself positioned right to the buyer's needs.
Randy Stevens of R.L. Stevens and Associates, our guest. You can find them online by going to interviewing.com. Find out what R.L. Stevens can do for you. They've got local locations in both Waltham and in Bedford, New Hampshire.
You know what we're doing now, though? We're going to jobhunting.com.
Jobhunting.com.
Jobhunting at rlstevens.com, excuse me.
Okay.
And we're doing that because a lot of people have been sending in resumes, and we can review them, and if we think there's a match, we could just have a preliminary conversation to see if we might help somebody. So it's kind of easy to remember if you're driving, or, job hunting at rlstevens.com. If you want to get considered, send it in. We'll look it over. We'll tell you what we think either way.
Sounds good. Thanks for the time, Randy. We appreciate it.
Well, I hope it was helpful.
Oh, it's definitely going to be helpful, I think, for a lot of the folks who are looking for jobs and maybe looking for a new start for the new year around the Merrimack Valley.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Randy Stevens, R.L. Stevens and Associates. So, again, you want to get involved, you want them to check you out, see if they can help, send your email your resume and to jobhunting at rlstevens.com.